the German serial killer who killed, raped, butchered, and cannibalized young men. Friedrich Heinrich Karl Fritz Haarmann became infamously known as the Butcher of Hanover after committing a series of murders of over 24 young males. For almost 6 years, Friedrich served as a police informant, which made him an unlikely suspect as he hunted down and killed his victims. While he confessed to nearly 30 murders, he was suspected to have been responsible for a lot more. Friedrich Haarmann was born in Hanover, Germany on October 25, 1879. He was the sixth child of Ollie and Johanna Haarmann, a poor couple who struggled to make ends meet for their large family. As a child, Friedrich seemed to display more feminine characteristics than a typical boy of his age. He also displayed some sadistic tendencies, which involved him tying his sisters up and scaring them, and threatening to report his father to the police for having murdered a train driver. Friedrich was not the best student either. He was forced to attend a military academy after regular school did not work out for him, and even though he performed academically well there, he was discharged for medical reasons. Once he returned to Hanover, he found work at a local cigar factory. In 1898, Friedrich was accused of sexually abusing young children, but was deemed psychologically impaired and therefore could not stand trial. Instead, he was sent away to a mental institution for rehabilitation. 6 months later, he managed to escape from the asylum. He hid in Switzerland for a year before finally returning to his homeland. In 1900, he married Erna Lowart and had a child with her. He abandoned his new family to pursue a life in the military. Friedrich proved to be a decent soldier. Late into 1901, however, he was diagnosed with an unspecified mental illness, due to which he was discharged and sent back to his family. Upon his return, his father attempted to have him admitted into an asylum again, but doctors refused to admit him. Friedrich attempted to lead a normal life by opening up a small business, but that collapsed almost instantly. Not long after that, he began to engage in small crimes like burglaries and con jobs. He was incarcerated often and gained a reputation with the Hanover police. Following one of his releases, he decided to become an informant for the police so he could drive attention away from himself. At the same time, he had also begun to engage in sexual offenses, which went unfiled with the police because the victims did not come forward. On September 25, 1918, Friedrich committed his first murder. The victim was a 17-year-old boy named Friedel Roth. Reports from eyewitnesses and pressure from Roth's friends and family led to the authorities raiding Friedrich's residence, where they found him sharing a bed with a 13-year-old boy. However, Roth was nowhere to be found in the vicinity. Friedrich was immediately placed under arrest for sexual assault, but for unknown reasons, his house was never searched and he was cleared of all charges not long after the arrest. When he was interrogated much later, he revealed that if police had searched his home at the time, they would have found Roth's severed head behind the stove. Upon his release, Friedrich met up with Hans Kranz, a man with whom he became romantically involved shortly after their meeting. In 1922, the two moved into an apartment together, which was when Friedrich resumed his killings. Kranz ended up becoming his partner's accomplice after returning home one day to Friedrich in the process of murdering 17-year-old Fritz Frank. Over the next 9 months, 12 other young men were robbed and killed by Friedrich, and their remains were thrown into the Lane River. For a long time, the murders went unnoticed. More than 500 human bones were found along the bank of the river line as of May 1924. The murders were connected to the same killer whom the citizens of Hanover dubbed as the Butcher of Hanover. However, there was no evidence to tie them to Friedrich yet. 17-year-old Erich de Vries was Friedrich's final victim. The police launched a manhunt for the killer responsible for all the previous murders and suspected Friedrich after records of his molestation in 1898 surfaced. The authorities proceeded to silently monitor Friedrich and finally arrested him after catching him trying to seduce a potential victim, Karl From. From had spent a few days in Friedrich's apartment before and had been sexually assaulted by him. When questioned, Friedrich revealed that he intended to kill From. Once they had taken Friedrich into their custody, police entered his home to search for evidence. They came across blood-stained walls and the clothes and belongings of the victims scattered around the residence. Friedrich confessed to the murders, claiming to have killed somewhere between 50 and 60 people. Official records, however, showed his body count to be somewhere between 24 and 27 individuals. Friedrich proceeded to help officers locate his victims at different sites along the river where he had dumped them. He was rather cooperative throughout the investigation but refused to converse with his victims' families. When talking about the details of his murders, Friedrich said, "I'd make 2 cuts in the abdomen and put the intestines in a bucket, then soak up the blood and crush the bones until the shoulders broke. Now I could get the heart, lungs, and kidneys, chop them up, and put them in my bucket. I take the flesh off the bones and put it in my waxcloth bag. It would take me 5 or 6 trips to take everything and throw it down the toilet or into the river. I always hated doing this, but I couldn't help it. My passion was so much stronger than the horror of the cutting and chopping." An analysis of his victims and modus operandi revealed that he targeted young male runaways and commuters, many of whom were prostitutes. All of his victims were lured in from Hanover's Central Station. He would lure them in by offering them food and beverages, and once they entered his home, he would bite through their throats to kill them. In some instances, he stated that he drank their blood and sodomized them, before dismembering them and tossing their parts into the Lane River. He ground the flesh of many of his victims and sold it as beef or pork. He either kept their belongings for himself or sold them for cash on the black market. On December 4, 1924, Fritz Haarmann's trial was conducted at the Hanover Assizes. Most people would describe him as a vampire or a werewolf, mostly because the term serial killer was not popular yet. During the trial, he accused Kranz of many of the murders, and the court ended up believing him. The court was especially shocked to discover that Friedrich had been a police informant, which was primarily why he had avoided suspicion for so long. During the 2 weeks of the trial, 200 witnesses presented their accounts. In the end, Fritz Haarmann, the butcher of Hanover, was found guilty of the murder of all but 3 of the victims whom authorities had connected to him. He was given the death penalty by guillotine. Kranz, on the other hand, was sentenced to 12 years in prison. The remains of Friedrich's victims were laid to rest at Stockener Cemetery a few months before his execution, and a memorial with their names and ages was erected in April 1928. He was executed on April 15, 1925. His last words were, "I repent, but I do not fear death." His head was preserved for the purposes of scientific study until 2014 when it was cremated.